it won't be very long before AI is a fairly normal infrastructure, chatbots and so forth, some of the other things they can do. And then your company's going to ask you as a human to do even more creative work on top of it, consultative work, selling.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app, and we'll keep sharing amazing conversations like the one we have for today. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for HR and IT employee service. I'm also an investor in and advisor to more than 30 AI-first companies and a firm believer in the power of technology to make humans better. Now, we learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact. I just couldn't pass up this clickbaity title, Why GPT is Actually Getting Dumber Over Time, written by Eli Becht and published this week at SlashGear. ChatGPT is suffering from what's being called AI drift, and it's actually causing the program to perform worse over time. A study revealed GPT-4, designed to be more reliable than GPT 3.5, performed better in March of this year than it did in July. On paper, the model should be doing better as time goes on, thanks to it constantly learning new things. However, it seems like just the opposite's taking place. What's most alarming is the fact that this degradation has happened over the course of just a few months. There are multiple explanations for AI drift, the link to the full article in the show notes, and you can read all about Eli's conclusions on your own. Now, shifting to this week's conversation, today's guest is one of the most respected thought leaders in the HR and HRTech space. Josh Bersin's name is synonymous with HR thought leadership. He first started covering the space in 2001, before selling Bersin & Associates to Deloitte in 2012. His current namesake company, the Josh Bersin Company, hosts the popular annual conference Irresistible and is a prolific publisher of content related to the future of work, talent management, corporate learning, and leadership. Josh is also the author of the popular book Irresistible, The 7 Secrets of the World's Most Enduring Employee-Focused Organizations, which was published in 2022. Oh, and by the way, Josh also hosts a great podcast, which I enjoy weekly, for his candid commentary on the world of HRTech. And without further ado, Josh, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to meet. We probably should have met long before. I stumbled into HR through the back door of corporate training in around 1998, when I went to work for an online learning company, not knowing anything about it. And through that company, and then the company that acquired us, and getting laid off and deciding I wanted to do research on online training, I eventually became familiar with all of the different domains of HR. And because I worked in technology for about 20 years before all that started, I also became an analyst studying the tech space, the HR tech space. And I have an opinion on why the GPT model is drifting. We can talk about later. So that's kind of where I landed, how I got into this. And my perspective is, my job, I think, or our job is to train, empower, support, assist all of the HR people in the world so that they can help their companies and their employees perform better. And that's been a really gratifying experience for me. And I still love every minute of it. And there's obviously many, many more things to talk about in that area, and there always will be.
We're driven by a common passion. We were getting to know each other before the episode, and it was nice to hear that you share similar vision. What inspired you to write the book, Irresistible? And maybe more important, if you could share with our listeners, what single secret surprised you most?
Yeah, I mean, the book has actually been in development for many years. I didn't sort of throw it together for the pandemic. So it has lots and lots of history of my research in different areas. The reason I kind of wrote it was I was tired of reading articles and studies about employee engagement that didn't seem to be getting to the real issue, that engagement as it was defined by HR wasn't really the important issue in companies. It was really performance and productivity and leadership and team management. And so what I discovered as I was writing it and doing a lot of research on Glassdoor and correlating Glassdoor ratings to various company practices was that the real issues in making a great company are much more complex than having a best friend at work, or giving people kudos or benefits that make them feel a little bit better that day. It's really about designing the company, the leadership, the organization, the mission, the purpose, all the things that are in the book. So, and what I realized also was, after having studied all these HR practices over the years, that the book could bring a lot of this complex research together in a digestible form for business people, not just HR people. So that's really how this book came to be. And it was I'm not a book writer, I'm a writer, but I don't write books very often. So it was a big project. It took a long time.
What surprised you most when you were doing the research?
I mean, the thing that surprised me the most, and continues to surprise me coming through the pandemic, was the fact that what I call the unquenchable power of the human spirit, which is that individuals, employees, workers, retail workers, manufacturing workers, managers, leaders, designers, engineers, can do amazing things far beyond what you believe or what you expect if you give them the right environment at work. And that simple idea is frankly lost on a lot of management principles. It's lost on a lot of HR practices. This idea that there's rating and rankings and evaluations that you have to do to make your company successful. I don't think that's really true. And that was really the theory and the concept behind the word irresistible, that if you create an organization that is empowering and is clear and purposeful for people, individuals will rise to the occasion. And the pandemic was a perfect example of that. I talked to literally hundreds of companies during the pandemic who thought they were going to go out of business. And sure enough, once they took care of their people, amazing things happened. And I think there was a big learning experience that happened during the pandemic that I'm afraid we're kind of losing already as companies get focused on the bottom line again. But that was really, that is the number one thing that I've learned from this whole experience of writing that book.
So you and I focused a lot on work tech or HR tech. And I liked that was what you said was, the biggest insight from writing the book, how the right environment can really bring out the best in people. What's one technology that you think has most accelerated or facilitated that ability to create safe work environments where people do their best work?
Yeah, the HRTech space, as you know, you're in it, is very, very complex, and it's littered with hundreds of tools and applications and platforms that people use. And the thing that changed a lot over the last maybe 5 years was this idea of not providing more functionality and more features and more analytics, but actually focusing on the employee experience and actually figuring out what the employee experience problems are, and then building systems or tools like the one you're working on, Dan. I believe you're probably working on something like this, that makes employees more productive and saves them time and gives them a more positive experience. That is actually only about 4 or 5 years old. All of the years before me and all of the HCM systems and HR systems and payroll systems, nobody thought about that. They built things for HR managers, for payroll managers, for whatever, there were lots and lots of good ideas, but this idea of, are we actually making employees work easier and lives better, was lost on most designers until the most recent time. And so that's the big change. And now, of course, AI is going to make that even better if we do a good job with it. And then that stuff under the covers is still there, but we don't need to see it so much, and we don't need to think about it so much, because we've got a layer of software on top of it to make it easier. And we have Zoom, Teams, Slack, lots of other things, ServiceNow, all these companies trying to build these layers to make, just like we've done in the customer part of our companies for much, much longer, for really more like 20 or 30 years, We're now trying to do it for employees, and it's a big, big positive investment.
What do you think changed? Let's call it from, say, let's pick a decade ago as a point in time when HR tech wasn't really a thing. And to your point, there were HCMs, there was, PeopleSoft and Workday and SuccessFactors, SAP, and, a few, or Oracle, et cetera. But this idea of HR tech didn't really exist. It was mostly just there to facilitate the management of people data from the perspective of the company. What changed in the last decade that all of a sudden gave rise to this notion that a bunch of technologies can really support the human?
The big thing that changed is the employees started to get all the power. A lot of that old HR tech was designed around what we call the industrial age, when the workers were replaceable parts, and we didn't have to think about them. All we needed to think about was the managers and the core HR systems. In the last decade, and this is getting worse and worse and worse, skilled employees can move around very easily. People can work part-time. They can have multiple jobs. There's a shortage of labor in virtually every part of the economy. The birth rate is low. The rate of change of skills is higher than ever. So employees are now, to some degree, in the driver's seat. There's unions too. There's places where this isn't perfect yet, but employees are more and more in the driver's seat. So companies are realizing if we can't improve the employee experience, they're not going to stay. They're not going to come work here. If they do come work here, they're going to get frustrated because they can't get their work done. And all this HR stuff that might be good for HR, if it's not making employees' jobs easier, then we got to question why we're doing it at all. And when I started as an analyst, nobody thought that way. It was always, what did GE do? Let's copy them. What did Google do? Let's copy them. Now every company's on their own journey to figure out what they can do to make their employees the best they can be in the business and the unique part of the industry that they're in. And that's a really different way of thinking about technology. And I think it's driven by the fact that employees just have more power.
It does seem like a decade and more ago, people were never at the center of the service ecosystem. It was really always about, you get a paycheck and you should be satisfied by your paycheck to do the work that you're told to do. But we didn't think about the employee experience as a thing that you'd invest in, and where you can get disproportionate outputs from similar inputs if you inspire people. I love the way of thinking about that. Now, a lot of lookers onto the HR tech space might look at today and say, it's a renaissance period, but we've peaked in terms of innovation. And then anyone who actually listens to your podcast or hangs around the HR tech space says, no, we're just beginning. We are just beginning this journey. You're talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs. Where do you think there are opportunities to innovate in and around the HR tech space?
Oh my God, there's opportunities everywhere. So the comment you just made, I just want to key on, and I'll talk a little about it. The other thing that's changed over the last maybe 5 to 10 years is almost every company is in the IP services or support business, where people's skills, people's capabilities, people's sense of belonging are the product. So there is no choice but to take care of your people. Now, the HR tech market is old, and most of the systems that people buy today were not designed with employee experience interfaces, with AI, with even mobile has been relatively new. It's more or less standard now, but it wasn't for a long time. Chat interfaces on Teams, and these other tools that people use. Meeting people in the flow of work is really what people want. They don't want to go to some HR system or some training system and then go back to work. They want to do it in the flow of work. So there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of ways to do that have yet to be invented. AI will, empower a lot of it, but it's also just creative solutions. I'll give you one simple example. So we have this online academy of education for HR people, and we've started piloting mobile courses that teach you small amounts of content through text interactions on your phone. very short text interfaces back and forth, asking you a few questions, not taking a lot of your time, to give you a chance during the day to learn about new topics. If I look at e-learning 20 years ago, this is like, 2 orders of magnitude easier than that, but nobody thought about it back then. We didn't even have mobile phones back then. So there's that, there's chatbots. I mean, the number of applications of chatbots we're going to see for education, for onboarding, for training, for knowledge management, for recruiting, it's just going to be massive. The kind of stuff you're working on, Dan, in your company to streamline all these back-end processes. I was at the Workday Analyst Conference in January, and I like Workday. I really have a lot of respect for them, but I was kind of joking around with them, and they were talking about generative AI and how they're going to put all this machine learning into the back end. And I said, why don't you guys just build a chatbot that sits on front of Workday so people don't have to run around and try to find the right button to push? And they kind of laughed at me and they said, well, we don't need to do that. We already have the Workday assistant. And, unfortunately, they don't realize that Workday is still really, really hard to use. So there's one right there. There's, 8,000 Workday customers you could sell a new solution to. Many, many examples like that. Microsoft Viva is an attempt by Microsoft to do that. ServiceNow is trying to figure out how to do this. I know your company is working on this. So, I think there's huge amounts of need for innovation here. And also because of the intelligence we have in AI and analytics, these can be intelligent interfaces that recommend to employees what they need to do without asking the employee to browse through a bunch of buttons to find something that they might need to, take their leave or change their vacation or whatever it is. I think there's massive amounts of innovation. And then this other big industry that I am big on, which I call talent intelligence, which is consolidating all this data we have about employees to give the company and managers better insights on, maybe we don't need to hire this job. Maybe we have somebody internally that can take this job. Maybe there's somebody in the company that can work on this part-time and we don't need to even have a full-time employee here. Maybe this job isn't even a job. Maybe it's a chatbot. Those are real situations going on right now inside of companies. And with the labor market getting tougher and tougher and tougher to hire, we're going to need these tools to allow our companies to grow, to generate more revenue per employee per hour. And that's why this stuff is so hot right now.
From the inside, I feel like it's criminal how over the years, we've really disrespected employees, expecting them just to use whatever crude, blunt objects we throw their way, and never really thinking about, what would tech look like if instead of putting the cog in the middle of the workflow, instead we put the human and really thought entirely around what's the best user experience. Or I love, the way you describe it, to be able to work in the flow, not always expect the user to go out of the flow, whether it's something as simple as updating your benefits or requesting PTO.
Well, the thing is, Dan, it's not. It sounds simple, but it's not simple. But there's like hundreds and hundreds of these little things that employees want to do. So that's why I think it takes time for the community to build these tools.
So for all the entrepreneurs listening, rewind the tape a few minutes and you might have to compete with Josh and I for pursuing some of these opportunities, but that was a great set of things that need to happen, and we're just getting started. Now, Josh, we can't have the conversation about HRTech without thinking about how the incursion of AI on traditional jobs is threatening employees. Although you and I know that it should be in service of creating a better work life, certainly employees are feeling threatened. What do you say to the employee who says, I see where all this is going? There's going to be a digital version of me, and I am the frog in the pot of boiling water.
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all. You've heard probably me say this. These are tools that are going to make you more productive, and they're going to allow you to do higher level things. Instead of poking around, trying to find a piece of data, enter something into a form, find a menu, tell somebody on the other end of the line to please go on hold while I find the right form for this, you're not going to have to do that. So now you're going to be able to do a better job of taking care of the customer, designing the product that you're trying to design, listening to the problem, diagnosing the problem, dealing with information from multiple sources that you would have had to spend 3 weeks consolidating on your own. the people that are going to fall behind are the people that are afraid of AI, who don't want to touch it, that are sort of leaning away from it. I mean, right now it sounds intimidating because it's been given an intimidating name. And we've had all these, articles in the New York Times about how dangerous it is. And I don't believe any of that. I think this is just a really advanced form of automation and data management and data integration that is going to be natural to us. I mean, we're working on our own solution for AI, which I'll talk about if you guys want to hear about it. It's just miraculous what it does. And it saves people a huge amount of time. It's like when I worked for IBM in 1981, and the first PC landed in the branch office, and we turned it on and opened up the spreadsheet. We were all looking at each other like, holy smokes, what's this? Well, spreadsheets didn't put anybody out of business. They just created a whole bunch of new jobs for people to build spreadsheets. So there'll be probably many, many more jobs created because of AI than there are jobs that will be eliminated.
I've talked about on this show, we refer to them as co-pilots for a good reason.
Yeah.
They're not flying the plane. And anyone who naively thinks that they're ready to fly the plane has not spent much time using actual AI. There's a reason why we refer to it as artificially intelligent. It's not sentient. It doesn't think rationally. But as to your point, it can accelerate a lot of traditional tasks. The other kind of scab to pick in this part of the conversation is maybe kind of devolves into the realm of psychology or even philosophy. But what does it mean to me as a human if I've spent a career, decades maybe, learning a skill that kind of defined who I am, my 9 to 5, my whatever, tasks I've perfected. And all of a sudden, almost overnight, in terms of, the long arc of history, almost overnight, a machine can do those things that made me human better than I can. How do I process or synthesize, given what you're saying? You and I are both AI optimists.
I thought about that myself. The kind of research I write, you can kind of type it into ChatGPT and get some of the answers that took us a long time to figure out. For people that are creators, that are writers, artists, building images and videos and so forth, these tools are not going to win Academy Awards. They're not going to be best-selling books. They're really very rudimentary compared to what we can do as humans. So I think we need to look at them as assistants to help us do our creative work even better than we did before. In my case, I do a lot of data analysis, and I look at a lot of, kind of cross-disciplinary, information. If I can use Bard or ChatGPT to find that and consolidate it, then I can come to better conclusions, and I can save people even more time and myself a lot of time. So it is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think we're going to get used to it. And the way human value add works in business is, as soon as something gets automated, it gets automated across all the companies. So everybody's just commoditized that. And now we need to add value on top of that. So it won't be very long before AI is a fairly normal infrastructure, chatbots and so forth, some of the other things they can do. And then your company's going to ask you as a human to do even more creative work on top of it: consultative work, selling, communicating with customers. It's funny. I'll tell you something really funny, Dan. So we just did a massive study on what we call the pace setters, the highest performing companies in different industries. We looked at healthcare, consumer banking, consumer products, and we're doing pharmaceuticals. And the skills that are the most important in the pace setter companies are not the technical skills like AI. They're skills like change management, communications, training, alignment, workshops, things that bring people together. I call this organizational ingenuity. So even though some of the mundane technical work might get more and more automated, these difficult, complex human things are adding more value than ever. So I don't really think people should worry too much about their creative work being taken away. Now, I know there's a writer's strike down in LA, and they're all worried about the rights. And I think there are some significant issues about where your content ends up and whether you get paid for it. And that is going to have to get resolved. And I think these AI companies are just going to have to pay up, to be honest.
I agree. And we will all bear the cost, which is
Yeah.
a good thing. I think it's important to protect copyright.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand the reference to the study. So the pace setter companies were the ones that scored higher on those kind of more innately human
No,
skills.
no. So what we did is we've been looking at various skills in these different industries, and then which skills are trending up, which skills are trending down. And then we said, let's look at the slice of the 10% highest performing companies financially. Do they have more tech skills? Do they have more whatever? Well, they do have good tech skills. I mean, there's no question about that. But the skills that are even more differentiating from that are these organizational skills that are kind of almost HRE related. So, what it tells you is that no matter how great your technology is as a company, and I'm thinking about, as a company, not you as an individual, if you can't interoperate and bring people together and work as a team, the technology alone doesn't make the company a better company. So that goes for you as an individual, your human skills, your relationship skills, your listening skills, your creative skills, your ability to think about information and use it and solve problems, time management, complex problems. Those things keep coming up as the most communications. These are always the highest rated skills in all these studies that are done year after year after year on what employers want. So I just don't want people to worry so much that the AI is going to do away with your job. Just look at it as a tool, like a hammer, a very intelligent hammer.
I have this hypothesis that the weak creators will overly rely on AI, and it's going to homogenize a lot of content. But those who are strong or who excel at those creative skills, or not even, we group those skills as creative, but I think it's more just, those who excel at the work they do and take pride in the work they do, I think are less likely to fall back on the lazy option, which is to have generative AI generate.
Right. I mean, if you saw what happened to BuzzFeed, they that didn't work out so well for them. I think one of the things about AI that gets back to the very beginning of the podcast, when you're talking about the dumbing down of ChatGPT, is deep versus wide. If you are a deep expert in something, you're going to be even deeper with AI, and your value is going to be even greater. And I think even the AI technology itself, I think we're going to have more. You tell me, Dan, you're a technologist. I think we're going to have deeper AI systems, not wider. And I think probably what's been happening to ChatGPT is it's amassing so much homogeneous information from so many strange sources that it's probably not getting. It's like a college student that's taking too many courses and can't focus on their major. They're not. It's not specialized enough.
We've seen this in every wave of innovation, going back to the 18th century in the first industrial revolution. Those who embrace new technology outperform those who choose not to. So whether it's, the Luddites in the 18th century or, those who feel like AI is here to dehumanize them, I feel like, part of being an AI enthusiast is saying now is the time for humans to embrace the technology and figure out a way that it can augment them. Because, as you've reiterated and articulated well, it's certainly not here to take your job. It's nowhere even close. And unless you're only reading science fiction, there are lots of opportunities where AI is there to help you out. I assume you'd agree with that.
Totally. Completely agree. But you're going to have to get comfortable with it. That's all.
Yeah, spot on. Unbelievably, we're about out of time, but you're not getting off the hot seat without answering one important last question for me. So we're back here, let's say it's 2028, and we're having a version of this conversation. What's one thing that is commonplace then at work that today just would seem like science fiction?
Well, the thing that I think is been slowly creeping up on us that is much, much more transformational than we realize is the fact that most of us are gig workers, even in our own companies. It used to be, when I graduated from college, you kind of latched onto a job or a job family or a career, and you kind of stuck with that, and you kind of attached it to one company, and that was your life until you retired. But if you think about the way people move between companies, the way they do gig work inside of the companies. During the pandemic, 45% of Americans, no, about a third of Americans changed jobs, and 45% of them changed industries. So I think what keeps moving is the barriers between organizations and within organizations are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So we're going to have careers and jobs and work experiences where we're doing a whole bunch of things for different parts of our company and maybe for different companies as workers. And these tools like the one you're building and others are going to make it easier and easier and easier for us to do this. I don't mean we're going to all be like Uber workers, maybe we will, but I think, if you pushed the needle out 5 to 10 years, that seems to be where this is going. And I think organizations may be smaller. I mean, they may have fewer people full time and more people on contract. And so that's one of many trends that I think, is been coming along year after year.
We explored that in an interesting conversation with a gentleman named Gary Bowles.
Yeah, I know Gary.
Yeah, great guy. And he talks about this idea of a work net as opposed to a workforce, where careers are kind of stitched together based on skills or tasks or projects that you love, as opposed to one job, one name on a business card, one employer. It's more about, a bunch of the things that make you your best self stitched together to form one career. Or
another thing, by the way, that's accelerating that is we're living longer. So people that are older, like I'm in my mid to late 60s, I mean, they're working till their 70s or their 80s, and they don't want to work full time chained to a desk. Maybe they want to work a couple hours a week here, a couple hours a week there. So there's just a larger and larger population of people that are willing to work this way, that want to work this way. So I think Gary's whole theme is right on. That's exactly where things are going.
Josh, don't retire. We need you to hang around. And
I can't retire. I don't have any hobbies. I like this work too much.
All right. Well, you and I both. This is their passion. Hey, this has been a lot of fun. I'm already envisioning having you back and picking up where we left off.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, of course. Before we wrap, audience, listeners, go get the book, Irresistible. And Josh, where else can the audience learn more about you and your great work?
2 places, joshbersin.com, where we have most of our corporate research listed and other things in our membership program, and then bersinacademy.com, which is one of the best deals on the planet to get access to much of the content we develop, courses, all sorts of fascinating information, and a giant community of HR people talking to each other and helping each other in all these areas.
There you have it, from the master. Go out and read the book, check out the resources. And gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the Future of Work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from People Rain. And of course, we are back next week with another fascinating guest.